In this Boruto chapter, we have the reveal of Sarada's true feelings for Boruto, Himawari's beyond chakra mode training with Kurama, and Boruto's fatal deal with Momoshiki. The cover page of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter 25, titled Those Girls, features Himawari walking alongside the newly reborn Kurama. Konohamaru returned to the Leaf Village with Matsuri's thorn bulb, and was surrounded by Himawari and the 3 members of Ino Shikacho. Moegi was dormant inside of her chakra tree. Konohamaru prepared himself and raised the chakra plant. Then he forced the thorn into the tree. He stepped back as it began to move. The thorn bulb burrowed its way in. It left behind a Renegon-like symbol that was surrounded by small spikes, which made it reminiscent of the sun. Inojin and Shikadai watched it all without blinking. Suddenly, the tree began to produce a lot of steam, forcing Konohamaru to shield himself. It was falling apart. Konohamaru caught his childhood friend with concern written all over his face. Her eyes were still closed. Worried, he called out to her and desperately tried to get her to recognize him. Chocho was just as concerned and called out to her master. Konohamaru continued to hold her, and eventually, Moegi's eyes began to open. Konohamaru watched her with bated breath. When she regained consciousness, her eyes were normal. Moegi recognized him and referred to him in the way that only she could. Himawari was overjoyed. Konohamaru's relief was just as apparent. He held her even closer, despite her confusion. Tears breached the corners of his eyes. Exhausted, Moegi gently said his name once again. Boruto was hovering above them all. He wordlessly observed the success. But unfortunately, he couldn't do the same for his own master, Sasuke, just yet. Over in the Sand Village, it was reported that the very same restoration worked on Shinki as well. Kankuro reported to Shikamaru that Gaara, despite being injured, was still alive, and his condition was no longer critical. He still wasn't awake due to the sealing jutsu, but was expected to do so soon enough. Now, with the Kazekage still out of commission, the story will be able to continue keeping the old guard out of current events. And considering what happened to his team, especially at the hands of his own doppelganger, I can only imagine that Shinki will have much more agency in the story once he recovers. Shikamaru was relieved to hear the news, but he was hardly in a good mood himself as he heard a knock on the door. It was Sai. The village elders were requesting the substitute Hokage's attendance. Dispassionately, he agreed to go. Now, Shikamaru has been colluding with Boruto, a top priority criminal and traitor, for some time now. And he is also responsible for the escape of said criminal. And he's even implicated Ino as an accomplice thanks to having her facilitate unauthorized mental transmissions to Boruto, which she now refuses to do. The feudal lord himself is fed up with the village's mishandling of the Boruto case. At this point, it is seriously straining the Leaf standing with the Land of Fire and even the other villages. Even if the Sand Village continues to be an ally, it's not as if they're a prosperous land themselves. After all, they are a desert nation. Back in the day, they were willing to miss out on the power of a tailed beast if it meant gaining better food imports. And despite the passage of 3 years, Shikamaru still has not claimed the position of 8th Hokage. So if he is outed as a traitor, then politically, the village would be at its lowest point in history. Not to mention the uncertainty of who would become the 8th Hokage in his place. The last thing we want right now is another Danzo fiasco. And at that, with Jura's fascination and reverence towards the Leaf Village, and Naruto being the target of his interest, maybe he will aspire to become the new Hokage himself, in what could only be a hostile takeover. But from there, we make our way to a hospital. According to Sakura's medical examination, Moegi wasn't suffering from any bone or muscle atrophy, and there was nothing wrong with her organs either. Sarada was a late addition to the scene. Someone in the room caught her eye, as Sumire traded a look with her. Sakura continued to say that Moegi's chakra flow was moving slower than usual, which was likely due to the tree feeding off of her chakra. Sarada stayed silent for the time being. Sakura concluded that effectively, Moegi was simply malnourished, so she just needed to get a lot of food and rest. Everyone was relieved to note that the consequences were so mild. Moegi apologized for making them all worry. Then her eyes moved to a special someone. Konohamaru was smiling at her from his seat. She especially thanked him for saving her. Konohamaru's response was cheerful. He just urged her to get well soon. Which then brings us to the awkward situation between Sarada and Sumire. Their last conversation was pretty heavy, so being in the same room was clearly uncomfortable. Sarada broke the ice and greeted her. She also asked if they could talk for a bit. Sumire was clearly hesitant. We saw before that she felt bad for her previous behavior despite the honesty behind it. So she agreed to do so. They returned to the very place where their dispute over Boruto began. Back when Sarada rushed into his arms despite knowing about Sumire's feelings for him. They overlooked the village with silence hanging in the air. Neither of them spoke for a beat. Sumire was clearly nervous. But this time, she broke the silence by complimenting Sarada on the completion of a difficult mission. Thanks to her and the others, Moegi and Shinki were safe. Sarada struggled to reply, but agreed. Sumire braved a glance. Sarada was simply looking ahead and wouldn't look at her. Sumire's face fell. Just as she seemed to be on the verge of an apology, Sarada interrupted by saying her name. Sumire turned in surprise. Sarada was a bit apprehensive herself. She finally turned and tried to back up a bit. She asked if it was alright to call the other girl by her name. Sumire processed the meaning behind the request. During their dispute, she pointed out that Sarada still only refers to her as class rep, as if she hadn't become anything more since their academy days. Looking down after remembering her own outburst, Sumire let her know that it was alright. Unbeknownst to them both, Ada was watching the whole thing unfold thanks to her clairvoyance. She has always been nosy when it comes to these two, so it's only natural that she'd want to keep up with her favorite soap opera. Sarada apologized for being insensitive about so many things. Sumire was still nervous and clearly felt bad about how things went last time. She also extended an apology for blowing up and being so rude before. Sarada admitted that at the time, she was so shocked that she wasn't really sure what to say. But more than anything, everything Sumire said was true. But that admission still didn't make Sumire feel any better about it. Sarada continued by calling herself a coward for hiding from her friend's feelings and her own lack of strength. She was running away from facing the reality that was staring right at her. With that, Sumire glanced at her again. The young Uchiha reminded Sumire of a conversation they had when they were younger. Sumire wondered if Sarada was bothered by the thought of other girls liking Boruto. At the time, Sarada incredulously shrugged it off without a care in the world. Sumire clearly remembered and waited for Sarada's point. Sarada let her know that at the time, she wasn't lying. Back then, she didn't have the slightest bit of romantic interest in Boruto. He didn't really have a place in her mind. Ada was hanging on every word, as in a sense, this was a reflection of her own predicament. She had next to no interest in Boruto, but lately, she's taken up a fascination. She admires how cool he is and longs to have a conversation with him. Sarada wasn't done. At some point, she realized that she was spending more and more time with Boruto on her mind. Sumire was listening closely. Sarada remarked that Boruto always finds himself in some sort of trouble, and as one of his teammates, she was always worried as a result. Sumire seemed to be mulling over that proximity. From there, Sarada became confused about her own feelings. Was her focus on Boruto because they were on the same team, or was it something more than that? Both Sumire and Ada considered her words. Regardless of the answer, Sarada didn't like the idea of spending so much time and effort thinking about those sorts of things. She began to wonder if she had the right to aim to become the Hokage with thoughts like that clouding her mind. But then she remembered what Yodo said to her before she died about subconsciously fooling herself. Her mind lingered on the sight of the girl dying without being able to tell Shinki how she felt. Sumire seemed to be a bit concerned. Ada seemed curious in equal measure. Sarada made the decision that she was done running away from her feelings. Sumire turned to her, and this time, Sarada looked at her too, with a slight smile. She plainly admitted that she likes Boruto as well. Sumire was at a loss for words. Ada's eyes went wide as a hand continued to cover her mouth. Sumire didn't respond. That made Sarada hesitate for a moment. She went on to say that her desire to help him would only make her stronger. With that in mind, she actually feels even closer to her goal of becoming Hokage. And fair enough, those feelings did allow her to unlock her Mangekyo Sharingan. But Sumire still didn't respond. Sarada concluded that those were her new feelings. Ada was actually getting a little uncomfortable with the silence herself and turned away for a moment. Sumire thought about her response for a bit. Then she made it clear that she already knew how Sarada felt for a while now. After all, it was pretty obvious. Sarada wasn't bothered. In fact, she could say the same about Sumire. Sumire seemed to find her resolve too. She thanked Sarada for being so honest and direct. Sarada wasn't sure where exactly that left the two of them though. Sumire smiled and made it clear that from now on, she wouldn't be holding back either. That seemed to clear the tension quickly, and Sarada smiled a bit too. Sarada didn't mind the two of them being rivals in this way, although Ada had her own feelings on the matter. She stopped using her power and was upset that they had such an intense conversation without her, as unbeknownst to the two of them, they apparently have a third person vying for Boruto's affection. With that, she demanded that the sensory unit make an immediate connection. Sarada and Sumire were holding hands and happily walking. Ada wanted to talk to them right away. But for now, the two friends were finally able to laugh. And this is sort of like the inverse of how Sakura and Ino handled their rivalry. Instead of having their friendship ruined over a guy, Sarada and Sumire's relationship has only gotten stronger. After that, we have the Uzumaki household. At the moment, its sole occupant was deep in concentration. Himawari was in the midst of intense meditation. She was running across a body of water, and doing so in pursuit of an evasive Kurama. The little Bijou lashed out and struck her with one of his 9 tails. She collapsed, and Kurama regained his footing. For a moment, he assessed her progress. Apparently, she was doing it all wrong, and wasn't understanding the principles he was insistent on teaching her. Himawari just looked at him. Kurama told her to stop relying on the strength of her arms when she throws a punch, to stop using the strength of her legs when she decides to kick, that she needs to do such things by way of her chakra. Chakra control was to be the core basis of this training, and she certainly needed better chakra control than the average shinobi. Himawari insisted that she was well aware. She also reminded him that she is a ninja. But Kurama didn't budge at all. To him, she didn't understand a damn thing. And she wasn't just some ordinary ninja. For that matter, she wasn't exactly like a Jinchuriki. Himawari paid more attention. Kurama let her know that despite being human, she's actually more similar to himself and Jura. Now she was really confused. But that wasn't the focus of their meeting, so he wasn't about to elaborate. His objective here was instilling the optimal fighting style for her to adopt. This was simply an introduction to the basics. Suddenly, an already difficult task just became that much more daunting. Kurama told her to forget all the ninja crap she knows. From now on, she needed to consider herself a personification of chakra in the form of a human. Everything would branch out from there. Himawari wondered if the chakra monster knew how tall of an order something like that was for a kid. Kurama just grimaced while hunkering down. He was tired, so they were done training for the day. Because of course, he's still small. Himawari wasn't ready to go just yet. Clearly, she had a ton of unanswered questions. But before she knew it, she was back in the waking world and alone in her home. She was pretty peeved about his abrupt end to a pretty one-sided conversation. Even so, it's clear that Himawari's potential is extremely high. Being able to strike with and use chakra as an extension of herself, along with the advanced chakra awareness and precision of a Byakugan, sounds downright monstrous. Himawari should be able to go beyond anything her father was able to do with Kurama's power. Despite being his strongest form ever, the downside of Baryon mode was that it burned through Naruto's life force. Deleting himself was the only way for Kurama to avoid killing him. But as a being of chakra, Himawari shouldn't have that issue. Being able to use Baryon mode for longer durations and actually train with it will make her absurdly powerful. Side note, looking at Himawari's shirt, it's pretty funny how in just one generation, Kurama went from being the most hated creature in the village to a mascot with his own merch. But just outside the house, someone else was watching over her. It was Boruto. Seeing his sister, even from a distance, managed to warm his icy expression just a bit, and he followed her example with some meditation of his own. Boruto focused his inner thoughts and directed them towards his own internal being. Suddenly, he was elsewhere with a jagged terrain. He found himself within the husk of the chakra tree where he once bonded with his undesired resident. Boruto looked around and found the focus of his visit. Momoshiki was casually reclining. Boruto's gaze sharpened. Without turning, Momoshiki wondered what might have gotten into Boruto for him to visit. Boruto's greeting was mocking and cold. Momoshiki was busy lamenting Boruto's narrow survival. Boruto let the alien continue. Momoshiki now believed that he should have just let Kawaki kill Boruto all those years ago. Now that his reincarnation was impossible, and he couldn't even take over Boruto's mind, there was only one thing left for a homeless soul like him to yearn for. Like a hater who doesn't read the story, he just wanted Boruto to die already so he could be free and return to nothingness. Boruto prepared himself. He was here with a question. Momoshiki was intrigued enough to spare a glance. Boruto asked if he would consider helping him out. Momoshiki immediately told him to take a hike, but Boruto told him to keep on listening, because he wasn't expecting help for free. In exchange for helping him defeat Jura, Boruto was willing to give Momoshiki his body. The alien could have everything he wants. Now he had Momoshiki's attention. And man, Boruto is really the son of Sasuke. He is willing to make a deal with the devil to get the job done, presumably with the expectation that Kawaki will kill him if Momoshiki takes over. In fact, Boruto's selflessness is akin to Itachi's at this point. He is willing to bear the hatred of everyone he loves if it means being able to protect them. The growth of this character is incredible. We already know how strong he was with Momoshiki's power when he was younger. So now that he's the strongest shinobi in the world, it's bound to be even crazier. Meanwhile, as they continue to walk and talk, Sumire expressed her belief that Boruto probably has no idea how either of them really feel about him, and Sarada was sure that that was definitely the case. But even so, that only made her like him that much more. It seems to me that while the original Naruto was about the essence of peace, Boruto's story is more about the essence of love. Traditionally, love is hardly a subject that shonen stories are good at handling, but there's definitely a level of interpersonal maturity to be found here. I'm sure that Sarada's confession will be the highlight for most in that sense, but like Sumire said, it was pretty obvious. For me, the handling of it and frequency of the awkward pauses was very authentic and very well done. Moegi's feelings for Konohamaru were also blatantly presented before now. Those two are unlikely to be a big focus from here, but I hope we'll be able to see more on that front too, especially when it comes to Konohamaru's reciprocation of her feelings. There is a lot to look forward to with this series, and we are finally back to covering it, so I hope you'll be here for the next one. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.